Welcome to Wicked Echoes. I'm your guide to the strange and unexplained. Let's uncover tonight's mysteries together. I need to tell you something. I'm not sure you're going to believe me, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's been sitting in my chest for 6 years, and I can't carry it alone anymore. I was stationed at a fire lookout in Cascade Range, Tower 19, elevation about 5,200 feet. October, late in the season. Most of the other seasonal staff had already gone home. I was one of 3 people still working the district, and the nearest one to me was a guy named Dale, who manned a station 11 miles south. We checked in by radio every morning at 7 and every evening at 6. That was the routine. That was the entire shape of my social life for those last few weeks. On October 14th, I woke up at 4 in the morning because something was wrong with the air. I don't know how else to describe it. You know how before a big storm rolls in, there's that pressure change, and your ears feel thick, and the world goes quiet in a way that isn't peaceful, but expectant? It was like that, except there was no storm in the forecast. Sky was clear, stars everywhere, no wind at all. I got up and walked to the window on the north side of the tower and looked out over the tree line, and there was a light down in the valley. Not a campfire, not a headlamp. It was a pale bluish-white light, maybe the size of a basketball, hovering about 30 feet above the canopy. It wasn't moving, it wasn't flickering. It was just there, perfectly still, like someone hung a lantern from nothing. I watched it for probably 10 minutes without breathing properly. Then it moved. Not drifted, moved. It went from stationary to about 200 yards east in what I can only describe as an instant. No acceleration, no trail. It was in one place, and then it was in another place, and then it was still again. I grabbed the radio and tried to raise Dale. Nothing. Static. Not even the normal background hiss you get on those frequencies. Just a flat, dead tone, like the radio had been replaced with something that only looked like a radio. I tried 3 times and gave up. The light stayed in its new position for another 5 or 6 minutes, and then it began to descend slowly into the tree canopy. It didn't go out. It just sank below the tops of the firs, like it was being lowered on a cable, and then the forest swallowed it, and everything was dark again. I stood at the window until dawn. Nothing else happened. The pressure in my ears released around 5:30. Like a valve had opened, and suddenly I could hear normal sounds again. Wind in the trees, a bird somewhere, the creak of the tower. At 7, I raised Dale on the radio, and it worked fine. Perfect signal. I asked him if he'd seen anything unusual overnight, and he said no, but then he paused and said actually his dog had been acting strange since about 4 in the morning, whining at the door, hackles up. Wouldn't settle down. Dale's station was 11 miles from mine. His dog had reacted at the same time I woke up. I reported the light to my supervisor when I came down off the mountain at the end of the season. He listened without expression, and then he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a folder and showed me 6 other reports from the same valley going back to 1983. Different rangers, different years, all describing the same thing. Pale blue-white light, no sound, impossible movement, radio interference, all in October. He told me the folder wasn't official. He kept it himself. The agency didn't have a classification for what was in it, and nobody wanted to create one. He told me to forget about it, and for a while I tried. But you don't forget something like that. You don't forget the way the air felt, the way the silence can have weight to it, the way a light can move in a manner that breaks every rule you understand about physical objects. I went back to that exact valley 3 years later on my own time, hiked in with a camera and a magnometer I borrowed from a geology professor at the university. Spent 4 nights camped at the approximate location where the light had descended into the trees. Found nothing. No burn marks, no radiation, no magnetic anomalies. The forest was completely normal. Unremarkably normal. So normal it almost felt like a denial. But on the 3rd night, my watch stopped at 4:12 in the morning. Mechanical watch, self-winding, had never stopped before in 6 years of daily wear. I woke up when it happened, and I don't know why that woke me up, because a watch stopping doesn't make a sound, but something about that movement changed. The air got heavy again, that same thick, pressurized silence. I unzipped my tent and looked up through the canopy, and there was nothing there. No light, just stars through the branches. But I could feel something. I know how that sounds. I know how unscientific and vague that is. But I'm telling you, that something was present in those woods that was aware of me, and I was aware of it. And we existed in that mutual awareness for about 90 seconds before the pressure released and my watch started ticking again, and whatever had been there was gone. I packed up at first light, hiked out, and I've never gone back. I don't know what lives in that valley. I don't think it's dangerous exactly. None of the reports in the folder described any harm coming to anyone. But I think there are places in this world where something exists that we don't have language for. And the Cascade Range has at least one of them. And it comes around in October. And it watches from above the tree canopy. This next account is from a lady I work with named Carla Voss. She was a backcountry ranger in the Bitterroot Wilderness in Montana, one of the most remote postings in the lower 48. She'd been doing the job for 12 years when this happened, so understand she was not someone who spooked easily. She handled bear encounters, medical evacuations, lost hikers in whiteout conditions, any and all of it. Steady hands, clear eyes, not the type to embellish. Carla was on a 7-day solo patrol along the ridgeline trail that connects Tin Cup Lake to the Selway River drainage. Day 4, she was descending through a section of old-growth forest, dense canopy, barely any light reaching the floor even at midday. She told me later the forest felt wrong, starting about a mile before she found it, but she couldn't articulate what wrong meant. She said the trees seemed too uniform, the spacing between them too regular, like they'd been planted in rows. But she knew that was impossible because this was the wilderness that had never been logged or managed. These were 500-year-old cedars. Nobody planted them. Then she found the cairn. In the middle of a small clearing about 20 feet across, someone had stacked rocks into a column about 4 feet tall. Flat stones, carefully balanced, the kind of structure that would take real time and patience to build. That alone was unusual because this section of trail saw maybe 10 hikers a year, and building cairns off-trail in designated wilderness is not something most experienced backcountry travelers do. But what made Carla stop and stare was not the cairn itself. It was that every tree surrounding the clearing was marked at exactly eye height on every trunk in a complete circle around the cairn. Something had carved a symbol into the bark, the same symbol on every tree. She counted them, 14 trees, 14 identical carvings. She described the symbol as looking like two overlapping circles with a vertical line through the center, almost like a simplified figure 8 standing upright. The carvings were not fresh. The bark had partially healed over them. She estimated, based on the growth patterns, that they were at least 3 to 5 years old. Someone had come to this incredibly remote location years ago, built a cairn, and methodically carved the same symbol into 14 trees, and then left. Carla photographed everything. She marked the GPS coordinates. She continued on her patrol. But she told me that for the remaining 3 days of her trip, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. Not followed, watched. There's a difference. Following implies something behind you. Watching can come from any direction, including above. When she got back to the ranger station, she filed a report and gave the GPS coordinates to her supervisor, who sent a 2-person team to investigate the following week. They hiked to the exact coordinates. They found the clearing. They found the cairn. The symbols were gone. Not grown over, not scraped away. The bark on those 14 trees was smooth and unbroken, as if nothing had ever carved into them. The team checked every tree in the area. Nothing. They photographed the cairn and came back and compared background trees in the photos with the background trees in Carla's photos. And they were the same trees at the same location, but in Carla's photos, the symbols are clearly visible, deep gouges in the bark. And in the later photos, taken just 9 days after, there's nothing there. Bark does not heal in 9 days. Bark does not heal in 9 months. Those carvings should have been visible for decades. There is no natural process that explains their disappearance in that time frame. Carla requested a transfer at the end of that season. She moved to a district in Arizona. Open desert, no dense forest, long sight lines in every direction. She told me it wasn't that she was afraid exactly. It was that she didn't want to work in a place where the evidence of her own eyes could be contradicted by physical reality 9 days later. She said it made her feel like the forest was lying to her, like it had shown her something and then taken it back, and she couldn't trust a landscape that did that. I looked at those photos myself. I'm telling you, the carvings are there in her images, clear as day. 14 trees, identical marks. And in the follow-up team's photos, those same trees are blank. I don't have an explanation. Nobody does. The report was filed, and then it disappeared from the system about 6 months later. Carla noticed because she went looking for it, and her supervisor said he didn't remember any such report being filed, which is impossible, because he's the one who sent the follow-up team. I don't know what to do with a story like that. I don't know what category to put it in. Vandalism, it doesn't appear and disappear. Hallucinations don't show up on camera. Official reports don't delete themselves from government databases, while the people who filed them forget they existed. Something happened in that clearing that doesn't fit inside the world as we understand it, and the world apparently decided to close back over it like water filling in a hole. Carla still has those photos on a personal hard drive. She showed them to me in 2019, and I sat in her kitchen, looking at her laptop screen, and feeling that same heaviness I felt in the Cascades, that same sense of pressure, like the information itself had weight that the air around it couldn't quite support. This one is harder to tell because it happened to me directly, and because the ending isn't really an ending. It's just where the story stops, because I stopped looking. I was working the north rim of the Grand Canyon, November, off season. The tourist facilities were closed. I was one of 4 staff members on the entire rim, doing maintenance and monitoring. The North Rim in November is one of the loneliest places you can legally be in this country. Snow on the ground, no cars. The only sounds are wind and ravens and the occasional crack of a branch giving up under ice weight. I was doing a routine check of the trail infrastructure. It was on the first 2 miles of the North Kaibab Trail, making sure the signage hadn't blown down and the erosion barriers were still intact. Standard stuff. I'd done it 50 times. I knew every switchback and every rock, every twisted juniper by sight. I was about 1.5 miles down when I heard footsteps behind me. Clear footsteps, rhythmic, boot on gravel, the exact sound another hiker would make. I turned around and the trail was empty. I could see about 100 yards up the switchbacks above me, and there was no one there. I stood still and listened, and the footsteps stopped when I stopped. I started walking again. The footsteps started again, behind me. Same cadence, same distance, maybe 30 feet back. I turned around, and again, there was nothing. No one. The trail was empty, and the snow on either side of the trail was unbroken. No tracks, no prints. Nothing had walked there except me. I want to be very specific about this because I need you to understand that I am not describing an echo. I know what my own footsteps sound like bouncing off canyon walls. I've listened to that echo thousands of times. An echo follows your rhythm exactly and comes from a fixed direction relative to the rock faces. These footsteps were not my echo. They had their own rhythm, slightly slower than mine, heavier than mine, and they came from directly behind me on the trail, not from any wall or overhang. I stopped again. Silence. Complete silence, except the wind. I took one step, a single deliberate step, and about 2 seconds later, a single step sounded behind me. One boot on gravel, then silence. I turned around very slowly this time. Nothing. The trail stretched empty above me in the thin winter light, and the snow was unmarked, and the air was cold and still, and I was alone in every way that I could verify with my eyes. But I was absolutely not alone. I made a decision in that moment that I'm not sure was brave or stupid. I spoke out loud. I said, "Hello?" I said it clearly and calmly into the empty air behind me. My voice carried up the trail and faded for about 5 seconds. Nothing happened. And then something happened that I have never told anyone until now. A voice answered. It came from behind me on the trail, at approximately the same distance as the footsteps, 30 feet, maybe less. It said one word. I need to be very careful here, because I have spent 7 years trying to decide if what I heard was actually a word or just a sound that my brain interpreted as a word, and I still don't know the answer. But what I heard, or what I believe I heard, was my own name. my first name, spoken once, in a voice that was not mine and was not anyone's that I had recognized. It was low and flat, had no particular emotion in it. It didn't sound threatening. It didn't sound friendly. It sounded like a fact, like someone reading a name off a list. I left. I turned around, walked back up the trail, and the footsteps did not follow me. Nothing followed me. I came back up the rim. I got in my truck, drove to the ranger station, and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes with the engine running and the heater on before I could make myself go inside. I did not report it. What would I report? I heard my name on an empty trail. There's no form for that. There's no code. There's no follow-up action that makes sense. But here's the part that kept me awake. 3 days later, I was going through the station's logbooks, the old paper ones that go back decades. I was looking for something else entirely, snowfall records, I think. And I found an entry from 1991. A seasonal ranger whose name I won't say had written a brief note in the margins of his November patrol log. It said, "Heard footsteps north Kaibub mile marker 1.5. No visual. Voice called my name. No source. Did not report." He'd written it small, almost hidden in the margin, next to his official entries, like he wanted to document it, but didn't want anyone to notice. I understood that impulse completely. I searched the rest of the log books. 1987. Different ranger. Different handwriting. North Kaibub Trail. November, mile 1 to 2, auditory phenomenon, footsteps, no visual source, duration approximately 3 minutes. That one was in the official entry section, but nothing else came of it, no follow-up noted. Then I found one from 2003. Same trail, same stretch, same month. This ranger wrote more, though. She wrote that she heard footsteps and then heard what she described as a whisper that might have contained her name, but she wasn't certain. She wrote that the experience lasted about 4 minutes and ended when she reached the Kokino Overlook Junction. She wrote, "I don't believe this trail is haunted, but something happens here in November that I cannot explain, and I want it on record that I experienced it while sober and alert and in good mental health." 4 of us, at least 4 of us across 30 plus years, same trail, same mile, same month, the exact same experience. Footsteps with no source, a voice that knows your name. I worked the North Rim for 2 more seasons after that. I never went back to that section of the trail in November. I traded shifts. I made excuses. I found other things to inspect, and nobody questioned it because nobody wants to walk the North Kaibub alone in November anyway. It's cold, and the light goes early, and there's something about the canyon in winter that feels less like geology and more like a mouth. I don't know what's on that trail. I don't know if it's the canyon itself, or something in the canyon, or something that comes to the canyon, the way the light comes to the Cascade Valley in October. I don't know if it's the same phenomenon manifesting differently in different locations, or if the world is just full of things like this. Small, local anomalies that have always been there, patient and strange, waiting for someone to be alone enough to notice them. What I do know is that there are 4 handwritten accounts in those logbooks, and there are probably more that people didn't write down. There are 7 reports in a folder in a supervisor's desk drawer in Oregon. There are carloads of photographs on a hard drive in a house in Tucson. There is a watch on my wrist that stopped at 4:12 in the morning in a forest in Washington. and started again 90 seconds later without being touched. These things happened. They are real in the way that anything you experience with your senses is real, but they exist in a category that has no name and no filing system, no line item in any budget. And that's maybe what unsettles me the most, not the experiences themselves, but the administrative silence around them. The way the systems we've built to describe and manage the world simply don't have a slot for any of this, so it falls through. It lands in desk drawers and margins and hard drives and late-night conversations. And eventually, someone puts it on the internet, and that's the only record that exists. I don't know what any of this means. I don't have a theory that ties it together. I'm not going to tell you it's ghosts or aliens or interdimensional beings, because I don't know, and anyone who says they know, they're guessing. All I can tell you is what I saw, what I heard and felt, what others saw and what they heard and felt, and that none of it fits, and all of it happened. If you work in wild places long enough, the world shows you its edges, the places where the map stops making sense. And once you've seen those edges, you carry them with you forever. They don't fade. They don't become stories that get less real with time. If anything, they get more real. They get heavier. They press against the inside of your ribs when you try to sleep, and eventually you'll have to let them out, or they'll crush you from the inside. So that's what this is. That's what I'm doing. I'm setting them down here, where someone else can hold them for a while. And if you've had your own experience, if you worked a trail, a tower, or a backcountry post, and something happened that didn't fit, I want you to know that you're not alone in that. There are folders and margins, hard drives full of people just like you. We don't have answers, but at least we have each other's accounts. At least we know the edges are real. Seriously, thank you for watching all the way through. That means everything to me. If this landed with you, a like and subscribe would be incredible, and notifications will make sure you don't miss the next one. Stay safe out there.